If you ever climbed down into the cuddy cabin of a Sea Ray Sundancer when you were 7 years old, you remember the smell of fiberglass and sun-warmed vinyl, the narrow V-berth where you slept with your action figures, spaghetti and meatballs in a galley the size of a phone booth, while your dad steered toward open water. That little white boat was the first place your family was ever really alone together. And the company that built it spent the last decade trying to find somebody, anybody, who still wanted what it made. Nobody did. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Now here is the part that almost nobody knows. The factory that built your father's Sea Ray, the one tied up at the marina behind the house you grew up in, started out making something else. It made coffins, golf cart bodies, and fiberglass coffins in a small shop in Detroit. And a 34-year-old man named Connie Ray walked in one day in October of 1959, bought the whole thing for almost nothing, and turned a Casket factory into the largest pleasure boat company in the world. That is not a metaphor. That is what actually happened. The same fiberglass that buried people became the hull that taught a generation of American kids how to drive. Connie Ray had no business being in the boat business. He had grown up rich in Grosse Pointe, flown bombers over Europe in the war, gotten a UCLA degree, and inherited a charcoal company in a small town outside Detroit. He could have lived the rest of his life on a porch. Instead, he saw a faltering fiberglass shop with 3 molds and a foreman named Jerry, and he saw the future. He kept Jerry. He kept his lifelong best friend, Arch Mehaffey, to handle the money, and he dropped the coffins and the golf carts and turned everything toward the water. 3 men in a shed. That was Sea Ray. The first boats rolled out in April of 1960, 13 to 17 feet long. Sport boats for Outboards, designed to be the prettiest thing on any lake in America. Because Connie understood something nobody else in the industry did. He had grown up watching General Motors turn cars from boxes into objects of desire. He picked up a phone and called Harley Earl, the man who had styled every Cadillac you ever loved, and asked him to come design the inside of a boat. Earl said yes. By the time Sea Ray walked into the Chicago Boat Show in 1960, the consoles looked like a Corvette dashboard, the upholstery looked like a Buick interior, and every other boat at the show suddenly looked like a bathtub. It worked, quietly at first, then like a river breaking a dam. By 1975, Connie launched the Sundancer 240, and that boat changed everything. Up until then, a cabin cruiser was a stuffy box for old men in captain's hats. The Sundancer was sleek. It was sexy. It had a cabin you could actually sleep in with the woman you loved. Suddenly, a 30-year-old couple from Indiana could afford to spend a weekend on the water with their kids in a cabin of their own. The Sundancer was the first cabin cruiser that felt like a vacation house instead of a fishing barge. It made boating possible for the middle class, and it built an empire. I want you to picture Connie Ray in those years, a man in his 50s flying his own Learjet out of Oxford, Michigan, to visit a small dealer in Wisconsin or Florida just to thank the guy for selling 6 boats that quarter, picking up the phone after dinner and calling a customer who had bought a Sundancer the week before, asking how it ran, testing every new hull himself before he let it leave the factory. That is who he was. A dealer in Algonac, Michigan, who knew him for 45 years, said it as plain as it gets. He said, boy, he was loyal to his people. He wanted to be with his employees and his dealers. That sentence is the whole company in one line. There has not been a boss like that in the marine industry in 50 years, and there will not be another. By the mid-1980s, Sea Ray was the second largest boat builder in America. 4,500 workers, 28,000 boats a year, 40 models from 17 to 60 feet, plants in Tennessee and Florida and Ireland, $400 million a year in sales. Connie was 61 years old, and then in December of 1986, the men in suits arrived from Illinois. They came from Brunswick Corporation, the same Brunswick that had bought Carl Kiekhaefer's Mercury Outboards back in 1961. The same Carl Kiekhaefer that Ole Evinrude had fired in 1927 from his own shop in Milwaukee. That ghost was still walking around the marine industry, and the Mercury engines that went on the back of every Sea Ray Sundancer were Brunswick's bread and butter. So when a rival named OMC started sniffing around to buy Sea Ray and pull Mercury off those transoms, Brunswick panicked. They wrote Connie Ray a check for $350 million to stop the deal, not because they loved Sea Ray, because they could not afford to lose Mercury's biggest customer. Connie took the check. He was 61. His health was good. His horses needed him. He had earned it. He walked away from the factory floor in Oxford and bought a 400-acre thoroughbred farm in Kentucky called Evergreen, and he started raising horses. And somewhere in the back of his head, he must have believed that the company would be fine. Brunswick was a big company. They would honor what he built. They did not honor what he built. I'm going to read you what a man who worked at the Vonore plant in Tennessee for 30-plus years wrote on a forum after Brunswick announced they were closing things down. He did not know anybody would read it. He just wanted to say it. He wrote that Brunswick has basically liquidated the assets of the company. A lot of the experienced and highly knowledgeable employees were ran off here. Very sad for a 30-plus-year employee, hoping someone will buy the company that wants to rebuild it with the quality and commitment that we once knew. That is one man. That is one comment. That is 30 years of his life in 3 sentences. Multiply him by 10,000 and you get what Brunswick did to Sea Ray. The decline did not happen all at once. It happened in the small things first. Within a couple of years of the sale, owners started noticing that limber holes were not being sealed properly. That hardware was loose. That hatches did not fit the way they used to. Then in the late 90s came the balsa core scandal. Brunswick decided to save weight on the big yachts by laminating wooden balsa into the bottom of the hull. Balsa is light. Balsa is strong. Balsa is also a sponge. A single unsealed screw hole was all it took. Water got in. The wood swelled. The hull rotted from the inside out. 40 to 55-foot Sea Rays built between 1995 and 2002 became some of the most expensive lemons in the history of American boating. One owner bought a 40-foot sedan bridge for $60,000 because it had been sunk. He was quoted $150,000 to repair the rot. On a boat that had sold new for $300,000, Brunswick refused a recall. They blamed surveyors. They blamed owners. The marine surveyor David Pascoe wrote it up in a magazine in 2002, and a generation of Sea Ray loyalists never bought another one. Then the Great Recession arrived. January of 2009. Brunswick mothballed the Riverview plant in Knoxville. 300 jobs gone in a single press release. 275 more cut across the headquarters and the other plants by Friday. Gary Johnson had been at Sea Ray for nearly 30 years. He stood outside the gate the day they told him and told a reporter, "What am I going to do with the economy the way it is? What am I going to do?" He did not have an answer. Neither did Neil McPherson, who had been there 16 years. He said they just came out and said what they needed to say, and that was it. By the end of 2012, they had closed another plant and laid off 225 more. 800 families in 5 years, 800 Christmases that did not look the same. Connie Ray was dying through all of this. He had been diagnosed with colon cancer in 2004. He fought it for 5 years. He lived at his ranch in Santa Ynez, California, with his wife Carol of 28 years, surrounded by his daughter and his 5 sons and a stable of horses he loved more than anything except them. He died on November 12, 2009. He was 84 years old. He lived long enough to see his company's worst layoffs in a generation. He lived long enough to know what Brunswick had done to his name. A man on a Lake St. Clair fishing forum wrote it when the news broke. He said, as the founder and visionary of Sea Ray boats, it was he who put many of us on the water going back to the 60s and 70s. The man had a passion for his products and the water, and we loved it too. Many thanks, Connie. Rest in peace. That was the obituary that mattered. Not the one in the Wall Street Journal, the one on the fishing forum. What happened next is what nobody wants to hear. In December of 2017, Brunswick told the world that Sea Ray was for sale. The most respected fiberglass boat brand in the world. 40 models, a name that meant something to every boater alive. They hired Lazard, the most famous investment bank on Wall Street. They put the entire company on the auction block, and for 6 months they waited. Not a single buyer made a real offer, not one. The brand that Connie Ray had built from a coffin factory and 3 men in a shed could not find a single person on the planet willing to pay for it. United Yacht Sales wrote it down at the time. Even though the business was offered publicly with hints of a bargain price, no buyer would come forward. That is what Brunswick had reduced Connie Ray's company to in 31 years. Worthless. So in June of 2018, Brunswick made the only choice that was left. They shut the yacht line down. The Sundancer family of cruisers that had defined American boating for 43 years was canceled. 825 people in Florida lost their jobs on a single morning. A man named Michael Loser walked into a town hall meeting in Merritt Island that morning expecting a normal Monday. By the time he walked out, he had a letter in his hand telling him his last day was mid-August. He looked at a TV camera and said, "Why give up so easy?" That is really my main question. Why? Nobody at Brunswick gave him an answer, not one that would have meant anything anyway. Today there is one factory left, the Venori plant in Tennessee, where more than 100 of the workers have been there for over 25 years. They built their 160,000th Sea Ray a few seasons back. They still come to work every morning. They still build a boat that says Sea Ray on the side. But it is not the boat your dad climbed into on a Saturday morning in 1982. It is not the cabin where you slept in the V-berth with your action figures. The yachts are gone. The cruisers above 40 feet are gone. The empire is gone. What is left is a Brunswick product line, a name on a hull. If you ever owned a Sundancer, you know what I'm about to say. There is a thread on a Sea Ray forum where a man my age posted a photo of himself as a teenager at the helm of a 1976 SRV 180. His 95-year-old father had kept it in a box for 40 years. The kid in the photo is laughing. The boat is half out of the water. He wrote underneath it, "I was pissed when my parents sold it and did not tell me. They wanted an open bow. I'd buy it back in a minute if I could find it." You cannot find it. Not the boat, not the company, not the man who built it. They are all gone in their own way. The hull is somewhere on a trailer in Indiana. The factory is a Brunswick subsidiary, and Connie Ray is buried in California next to the horses he loved. But for a few decades, between a coffin factory in Detroit and a sale that nobody wanted to make, there was a boat. It had a name your father trusted. It had a cabin small enough for a family of 4. It had vinyl seats that got warm in the afternoon sun, and a galley that smelled like spaghetti, and a V-berth where a child could lie awake at night and listen to the water against the hull and feel, maybe for the first time in his life, like the world was a safe and beautiful place. That is what Connie Ray made. That is what Brunswick could not sell. If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe so the next one finds you when it's ready.